The topic today is the uniqueness of the Guruvayurappan Temple of Brampton. So Brampton is in the Greater Toronto area, very close to Toronto, in Ontario, Canada. And in this topic, uniqueness of the Guruvayurappan Temple of Brampton, we will be looking at four major criteria from the temple design perspective, the construction perspective, the Pratishtha consecration perspective, and the rituals perspective. So looks like I will not be able to complete the whole program in 1 hour. So this is just going to be a part one of two. So at the very end, if you like the presentation, you can let me know and we will continue with the second half. So the first question that comes to everyone's mind is, why do we need this presentation? So the construction work associated with the Guruvayurappan Temple of Brampton is complete, and the Mahapradishta and the Ulsavams are scheduled in Brampton at the Guruvayurappan Temple between July 3rd and July 16th. That is hardly 2 weeks from now. And if you are interested, you can go onto the temple website www.guruvayur.ca and get all information from there. So Brahmashri Kariyannur Mana Divagaran Nambudiri is our chief priest and tantri. Most of the people in US would have met him because he is a tantri in a couple of temples in US also. So Brahmashri Divagaran Nambudiri Pad has got one of the record as well. He was the youngest male Shanti at Guruvayur Temple, and he was a professor at Tantra Vidyapeetham. The temple construction in Brampton started sometime in mid-1990s, and it's coming to a final fruition this year. So it took a long time. And what happened during the course of time is people like me who were not exposed to the intricacies of the design of a Kerala-built temple had a lot of questions, because none of us were an authority except our Tirumeni. So we used to go and approach a Tirumeni and ask him a lot of questions, like how come the other temple came up in a week? Why is this taking a long time? Why do we need to do this? Why can't we do the other way? So there was a lot of questions we kept asking, and Tirumeni was very patient enough to answer and address all our questions. And in fact, he did conduct a couple of seminars as well. So what happened here is, based on my personal experience, based on the way my comprehension developed in the last 18 years, I have made a few notes, and based on that, I'm just trying to create this presentation in a more educative, in a more informative manner, giving a lot of basic information, even for the people who have no concept or who have very minimal idea, because I started with a very minimal idea. So I just want to make sure that I share this information with it. So you may see a lot of basic, simple information being provided. So that's the reason, so that people all can grasp the subtler realities and the subtler concepts in this temple. So it's a pretty dry subject. So since it's a very dry subject, I try to make it condensed, lucid, and informative as much as I can. So let's quickly recap. Last month, we had another presentation, and that presentation targeted why temples. Why do we need a temple? So let's have a quick recap, because a lot of details from the last month presentation gets carried on to this presentation. So last month we looked at the history of temples, we looked at the relevance of the temples, we looked at the significance of the temples, then we also looked what the primary and the secondary need of a temple is. Our scriptures clearly state, Kshetrat Trayate iti Kshetram. That which protects you from destruction is a Kshetram, or a temple. In the last month presentation, we also looked at four Purusharthas, the Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. And we also analyzed or looked into the intricacies, the link between the mind, the thoughts, the desires, the vasanas, samsaras, atmajnanam, and finally Moksha. And the last month, we concluded that the primary reason behind setting up a temple is to provide an ideal place for a human being to understand the divinity within, to create the needed spark to be the catalyst to transcend barriers and to elevate to a higher conscious plane. So that is the primary need of a temple. So now let's look why the Kerala temples are a little different or unique, if you may call it. The Kerala tradition dictates that the temples be modeled, designed, constructed, consecrated, and rituals performed following the three major steps. The first one is the Hindu Shilpa Shastras, the second is the Agama Shastras, and the third is the Tantra Samuchayam text. So we all know Shilpa Shastras. It is a traditional canons of architecture. The second one is the Agama Shastras, Agama, that has come down. So sections of these Agama Shastras deal with the temple construction. And it is a collection of scriptures that comes from several Hindu school of thoughts. Then the last is the rules and regulations stipulated by the Tantra Samuchayam text. So you look at it from a hierarchical perspective, Tantra Samuchayam overrides all the rest. If you find any contradictory information in the Hindu Shilpa Shastras or the Agama Shastras, Tantra Samuchayam overrules it. Additionally, what also happens here with the Kerala temples is we do pay a lot of attention to Jyotisham, which is astrology, and Vadyam. Vadyam is a music that's dominated with the percussion instruments. So these two play a key role as well. The main thing which we need to understand is these three things are not a mandatory requirement, and not all temples you will find in Kerala follow this guideline. There are very unique temples, they do follow it. So when we read the third one, from a hierarchical perspective, we said Tantra Samuchayam is on the top. We often heard the word Tantra, right? So let's look what the word Tantra means. The word Tantra, if I say, it's the most misused or the misquoted word next to yoga. So Tantra, the word is derived from two Sanskrit words, Tannoti and Trayate. Tannoti means to expand, and Trayate, it's to liberate. So if you look at a textbook or if you just Google what Tantra is, it will say Tantra is a technique, it is a science analyzing the intrinsic and the extrinsic expansion. The moment we hear that, we get so worried about the wordings, right? Say, what are the high funda wordings coming here, intrinsic and extrinsic? Just forget that. So basically what it means is it helps you to understand your inner potential. It helps one to expand. It helps one to liberate the soul. That's all it basically means. So Tantra aims to enhance every aspect of human life, because to attain liberation, one must be perfect, or one must be very close to perfect. And we all know that none of us are. So to attain that level, one must master or learn to control the physical and the mental facilities and slowly move to higher levels in the spiritual progress. So that is why in Tantra, it clearly says there are two types of happiness. One is a temporary happiness and one is a permanent happiness. So temporary happiness is the outcome of ordinary desires, the karma which we have. It envelops everything, not just lust. If the object is available, there is happiness. When the object disappears, there is unease, displeasure, unhappiness. But permanent pleasure is lasting. It leads to liberation. It leads to moksha. So Tantra leads to permanent happiness and everlasting contentment, and also helps one to progress from ignorance to enlightenment. Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, as Jagadguru said. So based on the geographical perspective, there are four major schools of Tantra. Kerala Tantra is the youngest one among the four schools, and it combines Vedic, yogic, and meditative traditions. So when we say meditative, it's mostly Kundalini. Kerala Tantra is very particular, and it's more concerned about the salvation of the entire society. and it is concentrated more on the temple worship and rituals. If you look at it from a spiritual progress perspective, the greatest obstacle a person encounters is the vasanas or karmas. So as we know, if the field of vibration around us is positive, we will attract more and more positive things. Similarly, if the field around us is negative, we keep attracting more and more negative. This is where the temple comes in. The temple provides an ideal atmosphere for us to get rid of negative energies and to charge us with lots and lots of positive energies. So that's basically the nice explanation of Tantra as it pertains to the Kerala temple perspective. Now, let's look at the Tantra Shastram itself. So, in a Kerala temple perspective, the Tantra Shastram includes mantras, which we call it as bijas, the geometric patterns and the symbols, which we call mandala, the gestures, mudra, mapping the microcosm, which is nothing but our body, to the macrocosmic elements, basically means the outside world, assignments of icons and sounds, which in Tantra it's called nyasa. Then we talk about meditation, which is nothing but the dhyana or the kundalini yoga, to be more specific. Then the ritual worship, puja, the initiation, diksha, and others. So the temple shastram in Kerala comprises of three main categories. The first one comes from the Shaivite text. It's the Agamams and the Nigamams. So Agamams are the Lord Shiva's advice to Parvati Devi, and Nigamams are spoken by Parvati Devi to Lord Shiva. And the second category is the Samhitas. The Samhitas come from a lot of Vaishnavite text. And the last one is the Tantrams, which comes from Shaktiyam, from the Shakti cult. So the beauty about the Tantra Shastram is that it helps a seeker to achieve both enlightenment and also worldly success. So a person does not have to shun the world or run away to remote areas in the mountain tops, live as a hermit to reach enlightenment. So the basic crux and the most important stuff in a temple canonical structure or the hierarchy is the Tantra Samuchayam. And as we discussed, most of the temples in Kerala are designed and the rituals are conducted conforming to the rules and regulations specified in the Tantra Samuchayam text. So let's look at the history of this Tantra Samuchayam text and how it applies to us. So traditionally, we have heard the story that sage Parashurama, the avatar of Lord Vishnu, the creator of Kerala, established 108 temples along the Western Ghats. So starting from the Tulunadu, the south coast of Karnataka, all the way to the Trivandrum, there were 108 temples. That's what our religious text says. And Lord Parashurama set up an elaborate process of rituals, and he mentored a few priests. And there are textbooks like Kerala Mahatmyam and other textbooks which talks about all these interesting accounts. And when these people were trained and people started following it, and after thousands and thousands of years, some of the temple principles and practices were lost in time. Some of the manuscripts were never copied and they were lost or destroyed. And there were a lot of influences coming from the other school of thoughts. So that was the time Chenas Narayanan Namboodiripad decided to consolidate and author a book called Tantra Samuchayam. And there's a very beautiful story associated with it. It says that back 600 years back, Chenas Namboodiripad was a consultant at Zamarin's court. And Zamarin was a very high learned person as well. And one day, Namboodiripad and Zamarin had a healthy debate. They were questioning some of those rules and regulations that was imposed onto the temples, and they were referring different texts. And Namboodiripad started quoting a few texts, and Zamarin started questioning, where are you getting this information from? What is the authenticity of the source document? Then that was the time Nambudripad decided, there's a lot of information floating around. We need to compile them. We need to consolidate them. We need to classify them and make it into a text. And that is how this Tantra Samuchaya text came into picture 600 years ago. This book is considered as the authentic reference manual in the field of temple architecture, temple consecration rituals, kalashams, ulsavams, prayachittams, and all temple matters. It is written in Sanskrit. It's very detailed. It has got a lot of vivaranam added to it. And there was a lot of, vivaranam basically means explanation. And there was a lot of vimarshanam too, comments. They were also appended to it. So in short, what happens here is this Tantra Samuchayam has got 12 chapters. And they call it as padalams. And it addresses all the things, and it's a heavy, hefty book. It runs into thousands and thousands of pages. So once you start reading it, right, it's very difficult to read because the language is not very easy to follow. So I tried reading it a few times. By the moment I read 1 or 2 pages, right, I would feel sleepy, then I will put it back. So that's how difficult I found it, personally speaking, because I don't have any exposure to it when I started. So when you look at Tantra Samuchayam, what does Tantra Samuchayam talk about? The prerequisite for a temple. This wonderful text clearly says noble thoughts, efforts, and money generated via dharmic, ethical, and moral principles shall only be used to build temples. It's very clear from the line 1. It's how it starts. Noble thoughts has to be there, noble efforts has to be there, and the money that you're putting in to construct a temple had to be earned in a dharmic, ethical, and a moral manner. Then the first thing that he talks about is the Ejamanan. So who exactly is the Ejamanan of a temple? Ejamanan, as the word means in Malayalam and Sanskrit, means honor. A person or a group of persons who have prepared themselves mentally and financially to build a temple as per the advice of a chosen tantri. So the word tantri comes here. So who is a tantri? That's our next question. So tantri is a Vedic head priest of a Hindu temple in Kerala. That's how the Tantra Samuchayam explains. He is the one who installs the idol or the murti or the vigraham or the deity or the pradishta. These 5 words are used synonymous in a manner throughout my presentation, but it means the same. Idol, murti, vigraham, deity or pradishta. The tantri, what he does is he invokes the god. That's what we call as avahanam. He invokes the god in a form pertinent to the prana pradishta. He uses mantras, he uses rituals pertaining to the deity. He creates and he enhances the energy field around the idol, and from that moment on, he assumes the role of a guru. So creating, enhancing, and maintaining the aura or the energy around the idol. So that is why the tantri is the authority on the rites and rituals of the temple, and that is why we in Kerala temples held or hold him in a very high esteem. So the next step that comes after these introductions, and the first and the foremost step is called Acharya Varanam. Acharyan, as you know, is a teacher or a guru. The first and the foremost step of a temple construction starts with choosing a tantri. The Tantra Samuchaya, the authentic tantric text, clearly defines what are the characteristics one should look for when a particular tantri is being hired. It states 11 or 12, and I'm just going to quote 2 of them here. He needs to be a noble person, a person who has undergone Shodasha Samskaram, a person who has learnt and mastered the Vedas and the Agama Shastras. So the Yajamanan of the temple selects a tantri and he expresses interest to build a temple. The Yajamanan invites a tantri to perform all the events of the temple, starting from Bhuparigraham all the way to the Tirtham or the Abhishekam or the Arata. So it starts from day one, the preliminary concept, until Arata, he's expecting the Tantri to be there to help them out.
Join the meeting.
So the Yajamanan requests the Tantri to take the role of an Acharyan and to lead them. When the Tantri agrees, Yajamanan and the Tantri hold hands as a gesture of cooperation, and they recite the Kavacha Mantram of the deity, and the holy ring, which we call as Pavitra Modram, is handed over. Then the first step of the temple construction starts. It's called Bhu Parigraham. Bhu, as we know, it's just like Bhumi, earth. Bhu Parigraham means finding a suitable land and taking over the land legally for the temple construction. Tantra Samuchaya lists a long list of qualities and characteristics a land should possess to be suitable for a temple. Once the land is endorsed, an auspicious day and time is chosen, and the Tantri performs a Ganapati Puja to seek the Lord's blessing, to prevent any obstacles. The land is measured, and at the 8 cardinal directions, the north, the south, the west, east, northeast, southeast, and those kind of 8 cardinal directions, wooden markers or position identifiers are driven into the ground to mark the territory or the boundary of the temple. Then the site is cleaned up, then auspicious thread or a thread made up of darba grass used to envelop and connect all the 8 cardinal wooden posts, which we just drove onto the ground. The thread is connected in a clockwise manner, and when you are trying to connect it in a clockwise manner, we keep chanting the Astra Mantra of the deity so that the whole area is protected. So once the whole thread is connected around these 8 wooden markers, elaborate prayers are chanted, requesting the permission of all living and non-living things who have resided or settled in that place. They chant requesting the permission of all the living and non-living things. So the Tantri pleads to them to migrate from here for the holy installation of the deity, and he apologizes for the inconvenience caused. This is such a wonderful concept in Sanatana Dharma. Before you construct a temple, you are getting permission from all the living and the non-living things. This particular process reminds me of various other concepts in our Sanatana Dharma religion. For example, when we look at our Shastras, right? Our Shastras clearly say for a woodcutter, when he's cutting a wood, he's only supposed to cut a tree which has lived its life, a matured old tree, and not a young sapling or the tree that's sprouting up. And similarly, for hunters, there are rules as well in our Sanatana Dharma. Even though Sanatana Dharma values all forms of life, and even though we give ahimsa always a preferred role over himsa, when it goes to hunting, there's a lot of rules in Sanatana Dharma as well. It talks that, you cannot kill an animal which is pregnant. You cannot kill an animal which is feeding its young one. You cannot kill an animal that's being mating. So it's beautiful concepts. So when I read the concept of this Bhu Parigraham, and when I read it, it really touched me. So just thought I will just highlight this point. So once the Bhu Parigraham is done, Karishanam starts. The Karishanam is nothing that, it's basically what it is if a temple is being constructed, the land has to be an arable land. It has to be a cultivable land. It has to be a fertile land. Or in other words, to say that in simple Malayalam, it has to be a Krishi Bhumi. If it is not a Krishi Bhumi, what do? That's the time when the Tantri picks an auspicious day and a favorable time, a Muhurtam. Then he performs a puja to the Vignaharta, the Vigneshwaran. Then what he does is he uses a pair of oxen. And two ox come. They are of the same age, same build, and they're tied together with a plow and a yoke made up of venga. It's a special tree in Kerala. And when you hear it, right, you may wonder, are we still using a pair of oxen instead of mechanical plowing machine? Yeah, it is true. They still use ox. And when it happens, it's like the Tirumeni gets the 9 sacred grains, the Navadanyam. And he offers puja to the Navadanyam, then the Tirumeni starts the Karishanam Kriya. The newly made plough and yoke are locked into the neck of the oxen. The oxen are decorated with flower beads. Gifts are offered. And on the auspicious Muhurtam day, the whole land is plowed towards the east direction. Once the land is plowed enough, the Navadhanyangal, which has been handpicked, puja performed, is sowed, and the Mula Mantra is chanted, and water is prayed. The rest of the land is also plowed in the same direction or same fashion. Then the land is fenced for protection. In course of time, seeds germinate and yield. When they do so, grazing animals like cows are allowed to go and eat those grains. And anything that's left is donated. So then comes the next step in a temple construction called idols, the murtis or the pradishtas. The shilpi is selected, and based on the stipulated rules of Shilpa Shastras, Agama Shastras, and the Tantra Samuchaya text, he starts the work on the idols. There is a primary idol, which we call it as a Mula Vigraham, and there is a secondary idol, which is an Ulsava Murti. So if you have any Upadevatas, the Upadevata idols also get connected or annexed along with the Mula Vigraham. The Mula Vigraham is worshipped inside the Sri Koil, which we call it as a Garbhagriha, or in English as Sanctum Sanctorum. The Mula Vigraham is normally stationary and it's never removed once the consecration takes place. And the Mula Vigraham is typically made up of granite, black stone, shaligramam, because these stones are very unique, and it is said in our Shastras that these stones represent the Panchabhutas or the 5 elements. Ulsava Murti idols are made up of metal, preferably Panchalogam. It's a mixture of 5 metals. And the Ulsava Murti is a small idols which are normally taken out for ritualistic processions. So in Vedic and Tantric form of worship, Agni, the fire god, holds a key position in every ritual. Om Agni Mile Purohitam states the first stanza in Rig Veda. Agni is a messenger. He is a primary medium. The face of the deity inside the Garbhagriham is revealed by Agni to the devotee. That is why we seldom see any electric lamps inside the Garbhagriham in a Kerala temple. So the next one we need to talk about is the Kundalini Shakti. What is the Kundalini Yoga? Because some of the other processes which we're going to talk later links back to Kundalini. So I'll just quickly go through what Kundalini is. The Sanskrit word Kundalini means coiled up. So this is just the coiled, dormant cosmic energy, which we say is a supreme force of every human being. So what happens is like the energy manifests within us, and it's the same outcome as a supreme consciousness that pervades all around as well. So there are 7 chakras in Kundalini, as we all know. It's the Muladhara chakra, starts from the perineum area. Then it goes to the Swadhisthana around the prostrate area. Then it goes to the Manipuraham, navel area, Anahatam near the heart, Vishuddhi near the throat, Ajna near the eyebrows, and finally the Sahasraram, the 7th transcendent chakra at the top of her head. The Sahasrara chakra at the top of her head is said to be the region of Lord Shiva, pure consciousness, pure bliss. While the Muladharam chakra, which is near the perineum area, the bottommost area, is a seat of Shakti. So through certain methods, the Kundalini Shakti rises from the Muladharam, the bottommost area, and it goes through all the centers, the Swadhisthana, the Manipuraham, the Anahatam, the Vishuddhi, the Ajna, and it finally reaches Sahasraram. It fully flowers and it fuses with the Absolute in the Sahasraram. And it generates Sachidananda. So that is what we always hear about the Shiva Shakti Aikyam in meditation. So our religion is filled with a lot of symbolisms. So there's a lot of subtle details that are left hidden between lines. In olden days, what happened was we had a lot of learned people who were able to explain these nuances. They used to help us comprehend them. They used to help us mentor us, and even help us in the day-to-day life understanding these simple hidden truths. For example, I still remember when I was a little kid, when we used to chant Sandhya Namam, my grandmother used to force us to sing the Narana Ingene Jenichu Bhumiyil as well. So this particular song, Narana Ingene Jenichu Bhumiyil Naraga Vadid, it's like a 5-stanza one. And each stanza starts with Nama Shivaya, right? The Panchaksharam of Lord Shiva. And the last stanza says, Padiyaram Kadanavide Chellumbur. So basically, the English translation is, when I ascend all the 6 steps, I reach you, I merge with you, O Lord. But back then, when we were kids, right, nobody explains what these 6 steps are. So now when we start connecting it with our metaphysics and the temple structures and the ideology behind temples, we realize these 6 steps, they were talking about progressing from Mooladharam all the way to Sahasraram. These are the very subtle messages which Hinduism had, which was never passed on, which I feel. The next major activity that comes in a temple construction is the Shadadhara Pratishta. This Shadadhara Pratishta happens after Bhuparigraham, the acquiring of the land, and the Karishanam, the plowing of the land. So Vastubali is performed to please the gods within the land for the construction, and the Shadadhara Pratishta, which is considered as the first part of the temple construction. It starts well before the construction of the temple. So what happens is, like, you have a clear idea where the exact location of the Moola Vigraham or the main idol is going to be. Then what all I'm going to explain later happens right below the idol. So that is one of the reasons in a typical Kerala temple where you have performed Shadadhara Pratishta, there is nothing below the main idol. If you go to a North Indian temple or even go to any couple of South Indian temples, you always see the basement area filled with, party halls or some other rooms. But when you go to a typical Kerala temple where the Shadadhara Pratishta is done, it is nothing. It goes right through the ground. And what happens here is the exact location of the main idol is selected and a huge pit is dug right below the location of the idol. And the way they do it is, when they dig the pit, they try to go as far as possible. The limit is either you must see a rock or you must reach a water table or to the maximum height of a person, whichever comes first. So in most typical cases, you go 6 feet deep. That is what we did in Brampton, approximately 6 feet deep. So in this pit, which goes below on the ground, below the idol, you have 6 items stacked one above on top of the other. And these are all happening below the ground, which when it gets covered, you don't even see it. The first one that goes at the very bottom of the 6 feet depth pit is the Adhara Shila. That is the foundation stone. Then on top of the Adhara Shila, we have the Nidhi Kumbham. Nidhi Kumbham is a treasure vessel. It's sort of made up of granite or some stones. Then on top of the Nidhi Kumbham, you have the Padmam, which is nothing but a lotus made up of stone. On top of the Padmam, you have Kurmam. Kurmam are tortoises. And you have 3 different types of tortoises, one made up of stone, one made up of silver, and one made up of gold. Then on top of the tortoises, you have a long, slender copper tube, which we call as a Yoga Nalam. Then comes the Napunshaka Shila, which is nothing but a neutral stone on top of the Yoga Nalam. So all these things are stacked one on top of the other. So let's look at what all these things are and what all the significances are. The Adhara Shila Sthapana. The Adhara Shila is a foundation stone and it is a bottommost structure. This symbolizes the introspective nature of Shakti at the beginning of the universe. The Adhara Shila channelizes the energy from the ground and this emanates up to the Vigraha. Then comes the Nidhi Kumbham Sthapana. The desire to create is one of the deepest yearnings of a human soul.
Mute your mobiles, please. Thank you.
the Nidhi Kumbham comes on top of Adharashila. So the Nidhi Kumbham is what happens here in Nidhi Kumbham. It's a location where you have the desire, as we say, to create anything, even a life force, is the deepest earnings of a human soul. So this is where we have a strong urge to create forms. And this power associated with it is called the Mula Prakriti, the primordial creative nature force. So the Mula Prakriti is contained in this Nidhi Kumbham, which is filled with Navaranella. So for people who are not from Kerala, Navaranella is a species of paddy which is only found in Kerala, and it has got a lot of religious significance and is widely used in temple ceremonies. So what happened in the Gurayappan temple of Brampton is Namajapam sessions were frequently conducted, and all the well-wishers and the devotees have been praying and reciting this Narayana Namam over the last several years. So while chanting, they hold a handful of Navaranella in their palm and they channelize all the positive energy into the Navaranella while chanting this Narayana Namam. And this Navaranella, after this Narayana Namam chant, is collected and it is deposited in the Nidhi Kumbham along with the jewels, the precious stones, gold, silver and other few precious metals. So this Nidhi Kumbham goes on top of the Adharashila. The reason we say this Adhara Shakti, the primordial Shakti, is because it's very similar to the Kundalini Shakti, which is very stagnant, it's very concentrated, and it's the primordial energy that resides below. And on top of the Adharashila, we have the Nidhi Kumbham, and on top of Nidhi Kumbham, we have Padmam. And the reason we have Padmam, the growth and the expansion is represented by Padmam, which is nothing but Tamara or lotus. The lotus shoot rises up and it grows from the bottom of the soil all the way to the water surface, and it slowly petals blossom during the sight of the morning sun. So this growth and expansion is represented by Padmam. On top of Padmam, we have Kurmam. So when we look at this particular growth and expansion, which is nothing but a Chalanam. So Chalanam is nothing but mobility, and Chalanam is Pranan from a Vedantic perspective. And without Pranan and Chalanam, there is no existence. So the Kurmam represents the Pranan part of it, because the Chalanam is represented by lotus and the Kurmam represents the Pranan part of it. And the reason the Kurmam is a symbolic representation of the Pranan, it's because it's the nature of the tortoise, right? Because it can pull its head inside and out, and it can move with slow movements. So it's been equated to a Kurmam. So the Kurmam sits on top of lotus, and as we said, there are three different types of tortoises. One made up of stone, one made up of silver, and one made up of gold. And you may wonder, why do we need three? So the three tortoises are needed to represent the Trigunatmic principles. The Trigunatmic principles are the three gunas, the three intrinsic or the three inherent properties. Tamas, darkness, unawareness or lethargy. Rajas talks about the passion, the motion, the desires. And the Sattva, the light, the bliss and the goodness. So the stone, silver and the gold represent Tamas, Rajas and Sattva gunas. And the Yoga Nalam, on top of it is a long copper tube which is installed on top of Kurmam. And we know the copper is a good conductor of energy. And our rishis back then, thousands and thousands of years, did realize it. So this is how it's being linked together. Then we look at the five Panchabhutas too, right? Agasham, sky, Vayu, air, Agni, fire, Jalam, water, Prithvi, earth. So assuming we are standing, we have the Prithvi or the earth below our feet, and we have the Akasham or the sky on top of us. And we say that the Vayu, air, the Agni, fire, or the Jalam, water, is enveloped by the sky and the earth. So now let's try to connect the Panchabhutas with the temple construction, right? The Anantan or the infinite long Nalam is equated to the Anandan or the serpent on which our Mahavishnu resides. And he's worshipped in this Yoganalam. And this Yoganalam is an infinite emptiness, and it is said to represent sky. The Napunsaga Sila, which represents the infinite Brahma, the Brahman, is the earth. And the congruence of the Yoganalam sky and the Napunsaga Sila earth encompasses the other three, as we said, the air, the fire, and the water. So thus the philosophical view of the temple can be equated to the whole universe creation itself. And this is very unique to Hinduism. And not only that, this particular Sharadhara Pradishta, it equates each and every aspect of the universe, starting with the creation, all the way to the Kundalini energy as well. Because we just looked at it, the Adhara Shila, or the foundation stone, is nothing but the Mooladhara Chakram. The Nidhigumbam, which we have on top of Adhara Shila, is the Swadhisthana Chakram. The Padmam is the Anahata Chakram. The Vishuddhi is the Kurmam, the bottommost part of the Yoganalam. And the topmost part of the Yoganalam is the Napunsala Shila, and that becomes the Ajna Chakra. And the Napunsala Shila, the neutral stone, where the Yoganalam touches the Lord or the Brahman, the absolute personality, is where he resides. That's the way it is designed. Is when you look at this Napunsala Shila, there's a small pedum on top of it. And this pedum has a small hole in the middle. And the idol that comes has got a small peg. So the peg goes to this hollow part and it directly touches the Napunsala Shila. So every item starting from the bottommost to the topmost bimbam are all connected and touching each other. So that is how the energy is being dissipated, and that is how the whole energy rises up from the bottom and goes all the way up to the idol. So when we look at it, and when we look at the real engineering of it, and when we look at how it's been constructed to the very final details, and some of this information or the details, you're talking about very micron levels, and they still fit, and they still have a perfect contact, then you realize what a mind-boggling concept the whole thing is. The more we analyze, the more we are at awe at our ancestors for taking logic, reasoning, science, and all these engineering skills to such unimaginable heights. So this is how meticulous it is. So this is one of the reasons that the Guruvayurappan Temple of Brampton, they really wanted to complete each and every step of the process. They didn't want to bypass any major steps or any minor steps. They didn't want to cut any corners. That is one of the reasons it took a long time with all this meticulous planning, getting all the details, getting all the information from various texts, ordering these materials from India, bringing the materials from India, bringing the artisans from India. So it took a long time. So this is how it gets interconnected. So I just thought maybe I'll explain this as well. And when we looked at this particular Sharadhara Pradishta, this Sharadhara Pradishta is very, very unique to Kerala. So in some temples in South India, only the Kerala temples, very few Kerala temples have Sharadhara Pradishta, and the rest what they do is they have a copper plate type of structure which they keep it under the Vigraham, where in the copper plate they write a few Veda mantras, and they assume that the copper plate to absorb the energy and the vibrations and pass it to the Vigraham. And some of the South Indian temples, especially the Andhra temples and some Tamil Nadu temples, they do this, and they do this in lieu of Sharadhara Pradishta. So after Sharadhara Pradishta comes the next step called Garbhanyasam. So Garbhanyasam is a ritual performed to bring life and energy. The word Garbha means womb, indicating the creation of life. This ritual is done in strict conformance to Vastu Shastra. So what happens here is the Garbhanyasam ceremony enlivens or divinizes the inner sanctum of the temple for the first time. The Garbhanyasam is a ritual where the earth becomes pregnant with the deity. And what happens is like the whole temple is regarded as a living being. The ceremony is a crucial moment in the temple's spiritual manifestation. And what happens here is 81 substances. For example, gold, gems, herbs, roots, various types of soil, grains, medicines, miniature puja articles, and lot of religious symbols are placed in a small wooden box They are sealed. The box is believed to be the source of life and movement. It is believed to invoke the good energies and impart life into the building. The pit containing the boxes and small quantities of dirt which is collected from various different auspicious sites are put inside. And the Garbhanyasam is carried in either the center of the Brahmasthana, where typically the Garbhagriham or the womb structure will eventually come. And it is assumed that this particular location blossoms into a prasadam. The prasadam or the Sri Koil is the visible physical form of the temple of Lord Guruvayurappan. So these are all the main steps that has happened. And what we have looked at, we have only covered half of it. There's a lot of remaining topics which happens after this Garbhanyasam, and I will try to cover them in part 2 of the talk. So in part 2 of the talk, there's a lot of other details there which needs to be mentioned as well, because there are certain qualities and details we wish to have in the Pradishta. So how they do it, that will be looked at in part 2. The comparison of the Panchakoshams or the sheath will be looked, comparing it with the temple structure and layout in part 2. Then we also look into equating the concept of Vastu Purusha with the temple. How the temple and the human body are correlated, that we'll be looking into as part 2. Then the Dvajastambha or the flag post has got a lot of scientific information there. It's just a simple structure. So we'll talk about that. Plus, there's a lot of temple consecration activities. I counted around 25 activities or so, but I'm just going to quickly come up with 10 or 12. Like you have a Mulayadal, then you have a Bimba Parigraham, then there's a Jaladivasam, then there's a Prasada Parigraham, there is a Mandapa Samskaram, there is Agni Jananam, Jalodaram, Bimba Shuddhi Kriya, Netrol Melanam, Dhyanadivasam, Pradishta Homam, and Prasada Pradishta, and so on. So all these things, all the main things we will try to cover in part 2 of a talk. So concluding it, right, since we discussed quite a lot of things, I want to talk on something very light and something we can think of, because it's a Friday evening, we all would be tired after a long day of work. But there's something, a very nice experience I had 5 days back. So I just want to state that, and we will conclude today's talk. So this is just going to take another 3 or 4 more minutes. So the Guruvayurappan Temple of Brampton had open houses last week. And we are having this weekend as well, tomorrow and day after. So last week I was escorting a few people and I was just showing them the inner structure of the Mughamandapam, the Srilagam and the Garbhagriham. Because when the Pradishta activities start, only Tantris are allowed to go. So this was the only opportunities for non-Tantris to go and experience inner sanctum. So I used this option, and I was one of those tour guides, and I was taking a few people inside. Then after the tour, most of the people who came with me, almost all of them, they stepped out, and I was all alone in the Garbhagriham. Let me admit it, it was a little claustrophobic at first. I didn't feel it, was feeling a little uneasy. Then I had a very nice or a totally different feeling. It was a confined area, but I can feel an exceptionally calm atmosphere there. The whole atmosphere was very peaceful and serene. It was very relaxing. After some time, when I started coming into terms with myself, and after a few minutes, I could hear my own breathing when I was sitting inside the Garbhagriham. Every faint sound was getting amplified due to the parabolic or the ellipsoidal structure of the Garbhagriham. I chanted Om. The Om echo reverberated 11 or 12 times before it dampened out. So when I heard this, it was like a whisper, sitting in a whispering gallery or a gold gumbaz back in India. It piqued my interest, and I said, "Oh, I need to do some research online to see what could be." And there was 4 nice articles I came up with, or I read online. Those are the ones called Archaeoaquastic Research. The second one which I read was the Nada Brahmam. And the third one I read was about the low frequency sound waves and how they use on flames and fire. They even look at the Tyndall effect. And the fourth one was the CymaScope. CymaScope is nothing but a technology, where you can see the visible nature of sound. So I don't have time to go through all 4 of them, but you know what? I'll just quickly talk about the Archaeoaquastic Research. So human beings like us, we can hear frequencies from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. So we have studied that in school. And the sound which we can hear the best is the 1000 hertz to 5000 hertz. And the reason 1000 hertz to 5000 hertz is the best frequency is because most of the human beings talk in this range. So Paul Devereux is a professor in Cambridge University, and is one of the foremost researchers in archaeoacoustic. So they research in archaeology and acoustics. So this professor, he visits lots of ancient temples and other monuments to analyze the ritual use of sound. So according to him, he visited a lot of ancient temple structures, and he realized that all the temple structures were made up of different materials, different shapes, and they all had different shapes. But every temple structure had something in common. That something in common was they all resonated at 111 hertz. So at 111 hertz, the entire structure was resonating it. So Professor Devereux was very keen, and he was completely surprised when he looked at it, and he really wanted to explore what happens to the human brain when it is exposed to this frequency of 111 hertz. So he called for a few volunteers signed up, then he performed MRI scans on them. And while they were performing MRI scans, he targeted 111 hertz on these subjected participants when they were going through the MRI scans. So what happens during this particular frequency is the brain switches off the prefrontal cortex. It deactivates the language center. It temporarily switches from the left side to the right side dominance. So the brain switches temporarily to the right side dominance. So the right side dominance of the brain is responsible for intuition, it's responsible for free thinking, it's responsible for creativity, it's responsible for holistic processing. And when it does so, when it moves to the right side dominance, a fully tuned person goes into a state of meditation and a deep trance. So when I read it, I was really surprised, because we all know that the acoustics play an important role in Hinduism, especially the Hindu temples and worshipping practices. And the mantra, when it's chanted in the Garbhagriham, along with the acoustic enhancements and the percussion instruments and the conches and the bells, it all adds up. And what it really does to a devotee is the devotee's mind simultaneously moves within, and meditation happens effortlessly. Every aspect of the temple, from the architecture, the rituals, the worship, has been consciously created by our ancestors to make this experience happen. No doubt, they said, temples are vortex of energy and powerful spaces where an individual could imbibe the enshrined energies and transform themselves in a very deep manner. But look at the other perspective too. We have 5 senses, we all know that. Sound, sight, taste, smell, and touch. And we only looked at one, the hearing, the sound aspect. So imagine what happens when the other 4 remaining senses, the sight, the taste, the smell, and the touch, when they all work in tandem, what would it make to a devotee? Then that is a time you really run short of words to explain the ingenuity, the power or the thinking power our ancestors had. Then you look up to the Lord and say, wow. You can't explain that. So Mahatma Gandhiji's famous quote comes to my mind now. And Gandhiji, approximately 100 years back, he wrote this famous quote in one of his newspapers. It said, Hinduism had made marvelous discoveries pertaining to religion, spiritual knowledge, and soul. We have no eye for these great and fine discoveries because we are dazzled by the material progress the Western science has made. Ancient India has survived because Hinduism was not developed along material, but along spiritual lines. This was said 100 years back, and it still applies now. So here ends my part 1 of my talk. So if there is sufficient interest, we will pick a date and a time and for the part 2. And I conclude here. Thanks for listening. Om Namo Narayana.